Hola.
Good evening and welcome to Espacio Fundación Telefónica. Today we will be holding an interview with biologist, author, disseminator Tom Mustill, author of How to Speak Whale. This is framed in the exhibition that you can visit on the 4th floor, Echoes of the Ocean, here in Espacio Fundación Telefónica. Without further ado, I wish to give the floor to welcome our guest, Tom Mustill.
It's wonderful to be here, and feels a bit funny to be doing a demonstration about how technology helps us see the world in new ways after so much technology catastrophically failed yesterday. And I'm really sad that I missed it. I know that's a strange thing to say, but it sounds like an extraordinary day. Anyway, I'm glad the technology is working today so far. I'm here to talk to you about this book that I wrote called How to Speak Whale, and more generally about the change that's taking place as new tools are being taken to the ocean and allow us to see and experience things and change our minds about the life in the oceans. So I'm a wildlife filmmaker by background. I started as a biologist and I studied zoology, and then I worked as a field conservationist saving endangered species, and then for 20 years I've made documentaries for the BBC. And then I was visiting some scientists in California in 2015, and they said there's some humpback whales, which is one of the biggest kind of whales, out in the ocean. You should go and see them, and the best way to see them is on a kayak. So I went out, and we were being very careful to stay a distance from the whales. My job is actually sometimes to make sure other people stay far from whales. So it's a bit embarrassing that even though we were taking a lot of care, this happened.
He knocked it over. He knocked it over, the kayak.
Wow. Oh. You guys okay out there?
So that's and in fact you can keep the lights off me. I think you can all see me, and then you can see the screen better. So that's a humpback whale, which is about the size of 3 T-Rexes. It has the biggest arm in the history of life on Earth. So that's me and my friend Charlotte. We were both totally okay. The whale did a breach, which is when it throws its body out of the water and makes a big splash. And nobody knows why humpback whales breach. Nobody knows why any whale breaches. Some people think it's a form of communication. Other people think it's to dislodge barnacles, or as a display, or as a threat. It is not a way they attack. When a humpback whale wants to defend itself, it uses its tail, and specifically its pectoral fins, its big arms. They have which means that they can chase away orcas, killer whales, which even the biggest whales like blue whales struggle with. But I had a lot of questions after this happened, obviously. I wanted to know what was the whale doing and who the whale was. But I thought it would be impossible. Oh, you can turn the light off me. It's okay. If that's, because then I can see you more. But thank you. And I wanted to know what was going on, but nobody knows why whale breaches. Nobody knew who that whale was, and so I thought that would be the end of it. But then I saw that video, by the way, was filmed by a tourist on a whale watching boat on their phone. And the next thing that happened was that they put it on YouTube and it went viral and people were looking at it all over the world. And then another tourist had a video of the same thing. So there's us over there, me and my friend Charlotte. She's an accountant. She had never seen a whale before that day. So 2 videos of one. We were just on the ocean, the whales were over there, and our boat was over here, and 2 people filmed it, and 3 people took photographs. And I think the first thing that's interesting about this video, apart from it being a bit spectacular, is that it was recorded. And I think that the reason it was recorded was that it took place in 2015. This is the percentage of the world's population that has a smartphone. So in 2015, it had just got up to like maybe 29-30%. In California, it was probably a lot higher. So if it had happened 5 years before, no video. Nobody would have believed this happened, but instead there were 2 videos, and there was YouTube, so people could share those videos. And in fact, there were loads of photographs and loads of videos, and we were able to do some detective work. If you look at the arm of the humpback whale, can you see this white pattern there? So later that day, about 3 miles away, and the same whale with the same pattern was photographed jumping out of the sea. Now, every single whale has a totally unique tail fluke. That's the tail at the end. It's like a fingerprint. It's unique to that whale. So if you can see the tail fluke, you can identify the individual. When it jumped on us, you couldn't see the tail. But when we found the one that was jumping later, we saw his tail. And so we could identify him. And the way that they identified the whale was they used a new artificial intelligence tool that looked at the image and analyzed the image and found hidden patterns inside the image. So I got an email from a scientist who said, I know who your whale is. I know where they were born. I know who their mother is. I know how old they are. And I now get automatic emails every time this whale is seen by a tourist. They take a photograph, they upload it to the internet, it goes on a program called Happy Whale, and I know about this whale's life. And in fact, last year, they were testing off Mexico a new AI program. So you just take your phone and you take a video of the whale, and it identifies it automatically in real time. And the first whale that they tested it on was the same whale that jumped onto me. And this is his journey, his migration up the coast of Mexico. This, for a biologist, somebody who films animals, is really exciting. Not because of it, I think my story is a very small example of a much bigger story that's happening everywhere. This is how I started, in a forest trying to save endangered species. I would go out looking for rare birds, and I would spend all day, every day, staring up at the trees, trying to listen to hear where these really endangered birds were nesting. What kind of sounds were they making? Was it the mating calls of these pigeons, like, oh, oh? Was it the sounds of the babies? Were there no sounds? Had they died? I was there every day from 4 o'clock in the morning until after sunset, in a forest by myself, taking notes. And it was really hard work. What I wondered was, with these new tools that we have of recorders with AI that can find patterns in the recordings that you make, how does this change your ability to understand what's happening in nature? Can you go to new places and record new things? In my wildlife filmmaking, we'd often use new tools. This is a kangaroo called Ella, and we developed a camera to look inside her pouch. This is her Joey. We filmed him being born. This is when he was 3 weeks old. This new tool allowed us to see for the first time the development of the Joey in the pouch, his relationship with his mother, and it changed how we felt about these kangaroos. I'll jump past this video because I haven't got time. So what is the effect of new tools in our understanding of life in the ocean? Jacques Cousteau was one of the inventors of the aqualung. When he went underwater, he saw new things and filmed them and shared them with the world that changed how we thought about life in the sea. But he called his autobiography The Silent World. But it wasn't silent. We just could not hear the sounds in the ocean. This is a hydrophone. These were developed from the 1920s and 30s. They were really deployed most in the 1950s. When we first started listening to life in the sea, we were able to totally change our ideas about the kinds of sounds that might be there and the organisms making those sounds. These are recordings of humpback whale voices from the Bahamas, picked up by a US Navy hydrophone in the 1950s that was listening for Soviet submarines. This is Roger Payne. He was my mentor. I worked with him a lot. And he and Katie Payne and Scott McVeigh discovered that the sounds that these hydrophones that the US Navy were using these sounds had repeating patterns in them. They had structures, verse, chorus, verse. They had rhyme. They had rhythm. And they were able to go into the ocean and link the sounds to the animals making the sounds, which in this case was whales, humpback whales. They proved that humpback whales were making these sounds. They analyzed the sounds and proved that they were a form of song. This became a huge deal. Maybe many of you have the album, Songs of the Humpback Whale, or heard it. It was in National Geographic magazine. It was put on the golden discs on the Voyager space probe. But most importantly of all, it changed how we feel about whales. We used to think whales and dolphins were silent and stupid, and we hunted them industrially. But this is how many whales we killed in the world from 1900 to 2018. The peak of whaling was in the late 1960s. It was after this record came out and people started to change their minds about whales by listening to their sounds and understanding what they might mean, or that they were a song, that they were something like that they were using their voices in a way that we could relate to, that we cared enough to stop hunting them industrially. And there were other parts of this story, but the change in human culture from listening to these animals, because we had new recording technologies and new ways of sharing those recordings and new ways of analyzing those recordings, saved the whales from extinction. The blue whale, we hunted 99.9% of them. We almost totally wiped them out. The same with many other species. So, how am I doing? Okay. Normally this is a 45-minute lecture, and I'm trying to make it 20 minutes so we can have a good discussion. So excuse me if I look a bit like, So, what kinds of new tools do we have to discover things in the sea that change how we feel about the animals in the sea? Here are some examples from the last few years. So since the whale jumped onto me, I should add, I spent 7 years meeting researchers, going to meet people developing new technologies to listen in the ocean, and receiving recordings from people and traveling to conferences to try and understand what was going on, what was changing in our understanding of the sea. And you can, if you go to the exhibition on the 4th floor here, you can see some interpretations of some of those discoveries. So here, this is a drone dropping a camera onto the back of a blue whale. So now this camera takes you underwater. With tools like this, we can see the world from the perspective of these animals. Normally, if you want to study a whale, you go out on a boat, the weather has to be good, you have to find the whale, the visibility has to be good, you have a limited window, you have to stop yourself from being seasick, you have to have all of your equipment working well, and often you only see it when it breathes. Imagine trying to understand the behavior of a lion, or a tiger, or an elephant, if you could only see it when it breathed, and then it disappeared again, and maybe appeared like a mile away. That is, studying whales is an enormously difficult task. So we can drop drone tags onto them that sit on their backs and show them, with tags like that, they recently measured the heartbeat of a blue whale. I was on the boat where they were doing it. How often do you think a blue whale's heart beats? Any guesses? Hands up. And there's a hand at the back there. How many times a minute do you think a blue whale's heart beats?
600.
600? Crikey. Wow, that's after as many coffees as I've had this morning. Not... 3. Well, it is between those numbers. Sorry? 20. Okay, 20, yes. So it's between 3 and 35 beats a minute. Or 2, sorry, and 35 beats a minute. How do you measure the heartbeat of a whale? You can't go up with electrodes. You have to put you have to approach it. You must not destroy it or disturb it. You have to, with these soft tools. Here is a GPS transmitter on the back of a blue whale. This is a blue whale that's swimming off Chile, and these are boats. So you can see how we're disturbing the life of this blue whale with a GPS transmitter on its back. Looking at this, you can start to understand what it's like to be the biggest animal that's ever lived in a world suddenly full of much bigger, faster boats. This is a wave rider developed. I went to Hawaii where they build these. These are boats that sail themselves across whole oceans using solar and wave power, automatically avoiding other vessels, and hanging underneath they have hydrophones, underwater microphones, and other sensors. So they can go out day after day after day, even in storms. They can go to places it's too dangerous or difficult to go. This one sailed by itself from Hawaii to Baja California, directly, non-stop, and it listened the whole way, and it found whales, the sounds of whales in places that people had never heard whales before. So that's the top, that's the surface, and it can go in horrible storms that most scientific vessels could not stay in, and you can see underwater in a moment. So this is the microphone, the hydrophone down there on a cable. Sometimes sharks come and they bite the cables off, so they have to replace them often. And they also have robots that you can drive within and among whales. So this is a new tool that's where they have recording devices going in among their communities. So these are ways that we can take new forms of data. And then we have AI. If you have lots and lots of photographs on your phone, you might have noticed that now it will organize them for you by the names of your family members. That's using looking for patterns and matching patterns. And it can do this faster than you can do it, and sometimes it can match patterns that you can't notice. So that's matching the faces of fish in a fish farm to the pellets that are going down. A computer can identify the faces of fish and look at how well they're feeding. This is the top 10,000 words in English. Google Translate, I will not explain, in the book I explain it in detail, but essentially Google Translate functions by taking billions of examples of spoken or written language and making an embedding, which is a map, like a galaxy, of the relationships between all the words in a language. A great discovery made about 10 years ago is that there are hidden patterns that are the same in different languages. So if you give these machine learning large language models enough examples of Spanish or English, it can find the relationship patterns within a language and match them to relationship patterns in another language in the same way as you match faces in photographs and translate. So it can say this pattern matches that. So when you use Google Translate, it has not been given a bilingual dictionary. Nobody has taught it how to translate. It has been given many examples of one language, and it just matches the patterns automatically with lots of refinement and lots of balancing and lots of feedback. So the great thing that people are trying to do right now with the communications of whales and dolphins is get enough recordings from the sea to see if these pattern tools that we use for human language could work to find patterns in the communications of other animals. And I'm already out of time, but I will just, I don't know, have you, and this is what's happening in Dominica with sperm whales right now, where they are doing the biggest ever research program of data gathering and listening to another species of all time. They are using all those technologies that I've shown you, drones, like hydrophones on arrays, tags on the bodies of the whales, mobile robotic devices, to get a big enough data set that they can apply these new machine learning tools, the same ones that identified who the whale was that jumped on me, to try and understand their communication systems. And they have already discovered some new things, this project. One, they've discovered that these whales, they make sounds like, but that's just what we hear. The analysis has found that they have accents at the beginnings and the ends of the clicks. And that means that they have many more kinds of sounds that they can make than we could hear. And what they do is they combine those different kinds of sounds to make more complicated combinations. So this is one feature of human language. Is this meaningful? Does this mean something different when they make those different combinations? By watching the behavior of the whales, it looks like they are, that they have some signals, like the signal for dive, some vocalizations that are just made associated with other behaviors. They have unique identifiers for their particular social groups, their clans, names. They have whole communication systems that are different from one population of whales to another. Is this a language like our language, or is it a communication system that is very different? All we can see at the moment is when you do the first statistical analysis, that it is extremely complicated and has many statistical properties of human language. For example, the most commonly used words in English or Spanish, if you plotted them on a graph, it would go like this, like that. And that's known as Zipf's law. It's the same if you take the most common signals in the communication systems of some dolphins and humpback whale song and sperm whales. I'm so sorry, there's just so much to say, but we're going to discuss it in a moment. But have you got this app on your phone called, this might sound crazy for whales, but you can experience this yourself today. Have you got an app on your phone called Merlin? Have you heard of this app? Yes? Who, hands up if you've got it. 10 whale points to you. This is a wonderful app. So Merlin, it's a listening app. So you turn on your phone. So we are all scientists now. Everyone in this room has a scientific recording device that has a GPS, an audio recorder, a video recorder. It makes a standardized recording that you can share. And then if you share many of these recordings, suddenly scientists have recordings of wildlife sounds from all over the world. Merlin from Cornell University automatically identifies what species of bird is singing by listening to the patterns in the picture made of a graph of their voice. And I'll show you, this is me and my daughter, Stella, listening to birds in our garden. So that is the waveform. So that's a graph of the sound. And sometimes you can see my daughter talking. It has a particular picture, a shape, when she says daddy. But that was a house, but there. Human voice. So what?
That's how you just say.
Okay.
Oh! No, it's there.
See? And as it goes on, and you can take this out, it's free, it matches the shape of the picture of the sound to other examples of those sounds from other birds in other places. And the most powerful thing about this is you use it, you learn to see the shape of a sound and find the patterns. But when you make your recording, you share it back to the database, and the database gets bigger, and the number of examples of the kinds of bird sounds that exist gets bigger, and the power of the computer program to understand and find new patterns gets bigger too. So I'm not going to go into, there's so much to tell you, but I can't. Look, whales, there's loads of whales. But what is happening with all of these 90 species of whales is what's happening in all of biology. And that is, the biology is turning from this, which is the study of dead bodies that we can compare in size and number and shape and location, to the study of movement and communication and interaction and relationship. It was impossible for us to record these things until very recently because we didn't have video cameras and we didn't have audio devices. And when we did, it was people like me, wildlife filmmakers, that used them, not everybody. So it was an anecdotal science. You would film one thing happening, it would be a story. But if you film an animal doing something 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times, you can start to change that science, and it becomes a statistical science. So we're applying statistics to behavior. And this gives us the power to see patterns that we cannot see because our lives are short. When we go into nature, we disturb other animals, and we do not get to experience enough behaviors to notice patterns between them. And so the first part of this is trying to understand if we can find patterns in the communications of whales and dolphins, and whether they relate to our communication systems. But more widely, you're going to see that I started writing this book in 2017 when nobody knew what AI was. Now everybody does. I started writing this book thinking maybe somebody will do a project like this. They started doing the project while I was writing the book. They have already had a paper. They have already gone to beyond the stage of arguing about whether it is language, to discussions about what are the legal implications for other species if we understand the communications they have with each other, if we understand that they have culture. Because can I show you something very disgusting? Yes? Okay, if you don't want to see something disgusting, close your eyes. So, this is the hand of a beaked whale. Humans and whales are relatives. They are mammals like us. Inside their flipper is a hand. They used to walk on the land. We are very closely related, 55 million years ago. They have breasts. They feed their young milk. They grow very slowly. They need to teach each other how to survive. They have warm blood. They are highly social. They can live for over 200 years, some species. They are cultured. They have to learn to survive from watching each other and seeing how they adapt to their different environments. They have incredible virtuoso voices that have higher they can make more complicated sounds in many ways than we can. Some of them can make two sounds at the same time, like killer whales. They have ears that can hear frequencies that we cannot hear, and and from our recordings in the ocean, we can see that using their long lives, and their incredible bodies, and their similar biological challenges to us, they seem to have arrived at a similar solution to the problem of living as a society in the sea, where you must coordinate to survive, which is to transmit information using their voices. So these are really good ingredients for another species that might have something like a language. And can we understand it? We do not know. Maybe if we find patterns like a language in their communications and they're not like our language and we cannot understand it at all, that will be more interesting than if this Google Translate works and we find similar patterns. They are also, I should add, they are all very different. Whales and dolphins are not all the same. There's 90 odd species of them. Some of them, so this is Pelorus jack, which is a rhesus dolphin that lived off New Zealand in the 1888 to 1912. This single dolphin would wait in the ocean to guide individual boats across a dangerous patch of water. And the boats, because there was a narrow gap between two rocks, and the mainly British sailing ships would wait in the sea, and they would be led one at a time across this bit of sea. Why? This is a grey whale that is meeting tourists in Mexico. Grey whales were the most hunted in some regions, Wales. They were called the devilfish. Only 60 years ago, 70 years ago, this whale could have been being hunted by people. Now it approaches our boats and opens its mouth and lets us rub its tongue. Why? Some dolphins save humans when they're drowning and have done this. We have stories of this from 2,000 years ago. Other dolphins sexually attack tourists who try and swim with them. They're not all the same. Why? This is Porphyrius. This was a whale in Justinian Constantinople, the Eastern Roman Empire, 1,500 years ago. Wrecked all of the emperor's sailing ships. He was so angry, Justinian, that he sent his best general to try and kill the whale, and he failed. This whale spent all of its time sinking our boats, and we don't know why. Off Gibraltar, currently, today, we have a pod of killer whales that are playing with the bottoms of our boats and have had more than 500 interactions and sunk multiple boats. What are they doing? Meanwhile, a pod of sperm whales has adopted a bottlenose dolphin with a spinal deformity, and they help it and protect it and swim slowly so it can keep up with them, and they help it to feed. These are very strange, complicated animals. We have no idea what is contained within their communications, and maybe if we see it, we will not be able to understand it. So that, I think, is an extremely exciting and strange place to be. Will understanding these communications help save the whales in the way that listening to their songs did in the 1970s? Potentially, yes, if we care more about them. Or if we use our understanding of their communications to manipulate them, if we use this new power we have badly, we can pollute their cultures, like we've polluted the oceans with plastic and sound. So the reason I wrote this book was the idea of Dr. Dolittle is a kind of silly children's idea that animals talk to each other and that we could talk to animals. But already people have had a two-way conversation with a whale using AI to make a new version of the humpback whale's signal for hello and playing it to the whale, and the whale said hello back and they said hello back to the whale, and they had a 20-minute conversation like that. This is already beginning. We can already make an example of a new way of whale speaking and play it through a boat to a whale. What is that whale going to think? What kind of communication and connection is happening? Anyway, I've got like so many more things to tell you about, but I want to talk instead. I'll end on this example. This is a population of bottlenose of dolphins of Brazil, and this is a fisherman. The fisherman and the dolphins hunt together collaboratively, and they have done for over 30 or 40 years. The dolphins drive the fish to the fishing boats, the fishermen throw the nets, then they share the fish. This population of dolphins has a different dialect, excuse me, to the wild dolphins that do not interact with people, and they live longer too. Our cultures are already connected, we already communicate, we already collaborate. And in some places this is people hunting in association with killer whales in Australia 100 years ago for a long time. What kind of futures could we make where we could collaborate with other species instead of just watching them or hunting them or interfering with them? That, I think, is a good question to end on for now. And thank you very much. Sorry, I got overexcited.
Thanks very much, Tom. Thanks very much for your so interesting speech about your relationship with whales and on the things that led you to write your book. I can acknowledge that myself, as a science journalist, I'm not so interested in science or in this topic of science. But despite this fact, when I read the book, I felt trapped from the very first pages. I was astonished at how you started your fascinating story from your personal experience, from what happened to you at the Monterey Bay with that incident. I would like you to talk more emotionally, more personally about this experience, this really terrible experience, at the same time beautiful experience that you had. What was that day to you? You explain it really, really well in the first chapter of the book, the reactions of your friend, Charlotte. I think she even fainted on the plane later on. What is it that you remember most intensely about that experience that became so viral afterwards?
Well, thank you, firstly. It was a very calm and quiet morning, and it was very misty and cold, and we paddled out and we couldn't see anything. It was just totally foggy, and then the fog started to clear, and then we could see that there was just so many whales around us. So we spent an hour and a half like hitting the boat to try and keep them away, and it was really, Charlotte had never seen a whale before. It was very exhilarating. You could smell their breath coming over you. If you've smelt whale breath, it's like broccoli and old fish and salt all kind of together, and it covers your face, and they were feeding very like they were just clearly very focused on feeding in little groups of 3 or 4, like they'd come up and then they were hunting under the surface, and we turned around to go back, and we were feeling relaxed. It had finished. It was time to go home. And then it just came out the sea about as far as that post is there. And I just thought, I'm going to die. I've filmed lots of like elephants and lions on foot, and I've been very close to, violence, but like, this was just obvious. I thought, I'm dead. I'm dead now. Like there's, like a rock fall or something. But the other thing I remember thinking is, wow, ventral pleats. Because like the throat of a whale has these like lines on it, like a concertina, and they're called ventral pleats. And I'd always seen them, but I'd never seen them properly. And it was like above me, and I could see all the barnacles. So I wasn't scared, because I was scared in a few seconds, but in that moment, I thought, I'm going to die. Ooh, ventral pleats, and then splosh. And then I was underwater, and I was moving incredibly quickly, and I opened my eyes. It was very cold, just lots of white, and I had never felt the motion that much in water. Like I've never like physically. So what happened was like the whale, if like this is the kayak, the whale went like, and then it saw us. If you look at the video with its eyes, and then it changed, so it landed, instead of landing on us like that, it went like this, gunk, and its arm hit the kayak, but we flipped the kayak over, so it, boom, pulled us underwater with it and smashed it up. And then I swam back to the top, and the main thing I thought then was relief, because I opened my eyes and I saw Charlotte, and she was alive, and I was certain that she was dead, because she was closer to the whale. She's right at the front, and so I thought, oh, if I'm not dead, she must be dead. But she was totally fine, so it was great. She was a bit traumatized. I just thought it was incredible. Like I watched, like when the video came out like 3 days later, I just like watched it again and again and again and again, because we were lucky, if somebody had been hurt, it would have been really different. But it was just, even if you are filming a whale in the water, you don't understand how big they are, because we're used to looking at things in the air. It's only when it's above you, moving very quickly, that you understand how massive it is. Which is just an amazing thing to experience.
Me encanta cómo lo cuentas con esa parte.
I love how you explain it with so much passion. Even though it could have killed you, you made it into, instead of it being a traumatic memory, you made it into something very inspiring. Not just because of the beauty of the moment, but also because you decided that it was not just going to be an anecdote, a very emotional experience in your life, but the core of a more serious, a deeper research, kind of research. How did you decide that you needed to leverage that experience to write a book on it? A book in which you would also be researching as a biologist. When did it happen? How much time after the experience did you make the decision to carry out research on that?
I went back to work making films at the BBC, and all my colleagues just laughed at me. Mm-hmm. They were like, because big animals fall on you all the time if you make wildlife films. So they just thought, what a spectacular and silly example. But what happened was that because it went viral, anybody who had an interesting story about a whale wanted to tell me about it. So I was a bit reluctant, but I was receiving all of these emails and books and news updates. But the thing that it was that thing of them identifying the whale using AI, because I didn't know what AI was. I didn't understand how it could help you to understand the life of an animal. And, you know, I kept discovering more and more and more things about this wild animal. And I'm a biologist. Like, these are very difficult things to find out. And I wanted to know, how are these tools doing this? And if these are just the first ones, as they develop, what kind of things can we learn? The reason that I make wildlife documentaries is for conservation. I want people to see the living world, and my hope is that will change how we act towards, or at least just have wonder and to experience what's there. And this felt like a new frontier of that. Mm-hmm. So although it was too complicated to make a documentary about it because it's invisible and it hasn't happened yet. Mm-hmm. It's a bit like making a film about climate change. You know, it's invisible gases and it's about the future. Television is about filming something happening. So a book was the only way I could think of trying to share these ideas with people in. Yeah.
Y cuando estabas
and when you were writing the book and you were researching for the book, was there any specific finding and any specific discovery that was specifically surprising to you and that challenged your previous ideas on whales?
Was the story of this story here of do you see the black and white photograph with the killer whale's fin? Mm-hmm. That, because I was contacted by some Australian people from a community from the Yuin Nation, and their ancestors used to collaborate to hunt fish and whales with killer whales with a specific population, and they had a communication system that they used, and they taught that to the Europeans, some Scottish whalers. And there's a lot of, you know, they did DNA analysis recently of this population of killer whales and found it was totally unique. And unfortunately, the traditional knowledge from that Australian community has been lost, how that began. But they did teach these European settlers there, and there's lots of photographs and documentation of that. I think that was the thing, which has nothing to do with AI or technology. It's more the idea that I think as a wildlife filmmaker, and as an industrial person, we tend to think nature is over there and we are here, and sometimes we go and discover something from it and show it to each other, and to learn that they have their own unique cultures, mm-hmm. but also that those cultures are interacting with our cultures and they're shaping each other, I think is a really powerful thing that we haven't really understood yet. That you think that other animals are just being animals, but they're being shaped by you, and because they're individuals, they're learning things in your area, around your family, in your garden, that makes them different from other cultures of animals. So for instance, using AI, there was a study 2 weeks ago on great tits. A great tit is like a small black and white bird that goes like, and like, But for great tits, there's much more variety than we can hear. And there's a study of them in Oxford, in England, and they had 10,000 recordings of these great tits. And they have realized that the birds don't all sing the same song. Birds that have migrated in sing songs from their communities, but then they change their songs by listening to the other birds. Young birds develop new songs. The old birds aren't really good at learning the new songs, but they try a bit. And because of this movement of migration and the age of the different birds and their different personalities, the different birds prefer and sing different songs. Just like me and my mum and my daughter in the car together, and our different brains and our different backgrounds and our different inclinations, that affects the music that we play in our car or the songs that we sing. And I think it's just the beginning of this understanding of both individual difference, culture shaped by life, expression in voice, and that meeting of humans and other species. I think you're going to see a lot more stories about this. For instance, you can buy a bird feeder that has a video camera, and it will automatically identify the species of the bird that comes. But every bird face is different. So soon it will tell you the individual, and you'll know which bird is coming. And then you'll start to link it. Has it come back from its migration? Oh, it's that aggressive one. I don't like him. You know, all these kinds of things. Anyway.
Precisamente esa dimensión cultural.
This cultural dimension that you give your book, when you talk about this cultural dimension of the other animals, and when you talk about this cultural exchange that already exists between animals and humans, who are also animals, let's not forget that. That is one of the aspects that I have liked the most. It really gave me a lot of ground for thinking. It's overwhelming. Also, in connection with all this that you are explaining, there is some degree of risk of humanizing the animal behavior. We, as science journalists, do this a lot. When we write stories about animal behaviors, we often make the mistake of making them anthropomorphize them. So there's lots of questions for the big audience, really, in this respect. Where is the limit from the point of view of science and from the point of view of communication of this science?
Morphism, where you project a human interpretation or your own interpretation of what an animal is doing, why it is doing it, what is it is thinking. Firstly, it can sometimes be correct. You know, we do not have a problem with looking at an animal eating and saying it's eating, or running away in fear and saying it's running away because it would not like to be attacked. But it's a projection. So if it's correct, it's not necessarily because we have evidence, but it's because we have intuition. But there is another very powerful human intuition, and that's anthropodenial, which is where you see an animal running away in fear. You know, maybe a cheetah is chasing a gazelle, and we say, the gazelle is a living machine. It is not experiencing fear like us. It is just some legs with some muscles escaping from the cheetah, where we remove any motivation, any cognitive process, any assumption of similarity from prejudice. So projecting any belief about why an animal does something is the use of prejudice. And I think the limit is evidence and interpretation. I think I'm not really interested in what people think about other animals, and unless they have some examples of them doing it and some evidence and some interpretations. And different people have very different interpretations of some of the evidence I showed you today. The sperm whale clicks that I talked about, that there is a scientist here. He doesn't believe that they have a language. He believes that the complexity comes from a totally different reason. But I think the biggest danger is arguing about what we think is there and not going and seeing what is there. Because for a long time, this has been a philosophical discussion. You know, it's been a discussion of linguists who only study human language. And that feels very strange, not to be a discussion where we go and record, listen, reflect on it, and see what the similarities are. And I think it's been binary so far. Are they like us, or are they not like us? And I think what's changing, you know, is it language, or is it nothing? And now it's changing to being like there are many forms of communication system. How does their form and the different versions of it relate to our form and the different versions of it? I mean, in England, in the 1980s, we still operated on newborn babies without anesthetic. Because they could not speak, we interpreted them as not having the ability to feel pain, right? That was a decision made by the most expert scientists of the time. Against the human intuition, why shouldn't they feel pain? We said, because they cannot express themselves. Well, these animals can express themselves. We haven't been able to hear them recently. So I think it is too dangerous to decide in advance whether or not they can express themselves and how that relates to us.
Entonces la parte...
So, the complicated part of this interpretation, I understand that the most complicated part of this interpretation about whether we can call it a language or not call it a language, referring to what whales do. Does it have to do with the purpose? Does it have to do with the fact that there is purpose in those signals that are sent? Or does it have to do with any other aspects? Meaning, well, it is clear that they communicate. So what does it depend on? Whether we can call it a language or whether we should call it a different thing?
Changing all the time. For instance, there's sign language. There's a lady up there currently doing sign language. Sign language was not called a language until recently by linguists. It was not considered a full language. Here is a human being communicating totally articulately with a communication system, but some linguists refused to call it a language. I am not interested in the definition of language. That is one part of this. I don't think most people care. If a whale is able to say mother and then use the name of its mother, I am hungry and I'm scared, where is my sister? That's enough for me. I don't care if they cannot formulate a recursive question about a fictional future imaginary setting. I want to know what tasks and what relationships, challenges the animal is using its communication system for. That's what challenge of survival is it being utilized for, not what human current definition of language it fits into, because I think that's why I think Roger Payne, he just uses the term whale speak, you know, as a kind of fudge. English in fudge means like you kind of squeeze it into the box, like because it's not nothing, and it might not be as complicated as ours. It's almost certainly not as complicated as ours, but it's something in the middle or around the sides. What is it? What is it? And almost certainly, I think one application at the moment that's happening is that at the moment animals are not legal people. They are objects and property, so they have no legal standing. And in the UK and in other countries, we are changing. We have different rules for different animals. You can kill these ones in more painful ways than these ones. You can keep these ones in captivity. These ones you can control. These ones you can't control. And there are many decisions being made about the legal understanding of animals, and they relate to discoveries about their cognitive power, their ability to sense things, their relationships. They relate to what those animals can have and how that can be broken. For instance, do they experience freedom? So can they experience captivity? Are they sensitive? So can they have pain? Do they feel relationships? So can they be broken up in their families? That's how we think about our rights. We think about things that are useful to us and how they can be damaged. So you have to prove the thing exists in the first place before you can prove that it's damaged and try to protect against it. And two of the things that this research is being used for now, legally in the United States, is to increase the protection of cetaceans, whales and dolphins, by saying, if we can hear them crying out in distress and pain, does this mean that they can experience torture? Because one of the conventions in human rights is that we do not torture each other. If you're a whale in the sea and you are listening to terrible sounds all the time and it's driving you so mad that you throw yourself out of the water and you die, and there is bubbles in your blood from it coming to the surface too quickly, that is a pretty good example of extreme distress. So they're looking at the communication signals that the animals have, what's in them, how can they be disrupted, what ones do they make when they are disrupted as evidence of torture so they can give protection from torture. And culture is the other one. As a conservation biologist, I thought that to save an endangered species, you make sure that they all don't die. That's it. If they all die, you have failed, and if some of them are alive, you are succeeding. So, but what if there are different cultures of animals? And so even if you save the animals, the culture is extinguished. That's a new area of conservation that you have to think about. How not to disturb, not to move them around. And one of the conventions of human rights is about the right to experience and take part in your culture. So those are two quite specific examples, but you don't need to prove language to prove that communication has culture or that communication can indicate torture. And that can change the lives of the whales. The scientists studying this, they want to save whales. They're doing this because they think it's a chance to change. 400,000 whales are killed by accident in fishing nets every year. Whales and dolphins and porpoises. This is a terrible death. It is an accident. We're not hunting them. If we just change the methods of our fishing, a large amount of this could be avoided. How do you push this up the priority list? These investigations into their lives, we try to connect their lives to people's emotions and place them within human legal frameworks. Sorry, that's a really complicated answer in a different language.
No, está bien.
Okay.
Sí. Me gustaría después dar paso.
I'd like to open the floor for the audience to ask questions, but there is one specific question that I don't want to not ask. Do you think that scientists like you, when you study animal communication, do you think you run the risk, you take the risk of invading their own world, as we have done with other cultures, human cultures? Do you think there is a risk that could have even ethical implications in colonizing other species with our own technology, invading them, disrupting them?
Question. It's actually being asked at the moment in gatherings of scientists. So one thing is that in trying to understand animal communication, the normal way people did it was a playback experiment. So you make a recording of the sound an animal makes, and then you play it back to the animal, and you see what it does. But the problem is, the simplest and easiest playback experiments are where you play the animal's alarm call. An alarm call is the vocalization or signal it gives when a predator is coming from it. So if, for instance, vervet monkeys have 3 different alarm calls, one for eagle, one for snake, one for leopard. And the scientists know this because they recorded the 3 different calls and they played them at the monkeys. And when they make the eagle one, they run into the tree. And when they play the snake one, they run up the tree. And when they play the leopard one, they run down and out, and they act very differently. But this is terrifying for the vervet monkeys. You're playing them their nightmare to discover this. What we could do now with playback experiments with AI-generated whale sounds is confuse the whales, infect their cultures is one worry. You know, the humpback whale song changes each year from listening to the songs of other whales. The song of the blackbird also does that. And sometimes, do you remember old internet modems that went like in England, there were blackbirds that learnt to make that sound. But then we upgraded our internet modems and they were silent. And these blackbirds, these male blackbirds, were singing an internet modem song that was out of date. It had no function, like it was irrelevant. That's a funny example. But like, these animals are listening and reflecting back. And if we just turn up and start playing them their weird versions of their own sounds from boats, they don't even know it's us. They're just like, a different boat is making this sound. It could really confuse them and it could mess with their culture. Mm-hmm. However, this is a really small worry. If you think that tens of thousands of them are being killed by being hit by boats and hundreds of thousands of them are being killed by being caught in nets, the main ethical worry is, if you understand the communication system of bees, can you tell all the bees in Ukraine to leave and they have no harvests? Or can you make all the fish swim into the turbine, the cooling pipes of a nuclear generator? Or how else can you manipulate animals using this for human goals that are not good for those animals? And we have used animals in war, and we use animals in spying, and we use animals in industry by controlling them. And this is a way of controlling them. So many conversations are going on now about how do we make legal guidelines and ethical frameworks to avoid accidentally polluting their cultures, but also bad actors, corporations, nation states, from using this new power of how other animals communicate. Because communication is control. The reasons animals communicate to each other is to make other animals do different things. That's why we communicate with each other. It's to collaborate or manipulate each other. So that's happening at the moment. There's conversations, and indigenous people are very involved in them. Many people from, say, Amazonian cultures have experienced colonization and experienced the damage of contact with other human cultures. So there are many. I've been in like conversations and gatherings where people from those communities are bringing their experiences, and also they are coming from communities where people already talk to animals and have belief systems around that. So it's very strange, because when the whale jumped onto me, I thought, cool, I might be able to speak whale, but I don't want to speak whale anymore. I don't want to say anything. I want to listen. Now I understand really what it means. I just think this is a listening tool. The best thing we can do is be quiet for a very long time and understand more what's there and not seek to project anymore.
Súper necesario que los...
It is very, very necessary for all conservationists, biologists. It's important for you to reflect so that the same mistakes are not made as those that were made in the anthropology of the 19th century. I would have millions of questions to ask, but I would like to give the opportunity to the audience. Let's see if the audience has other questions to ask. If not, I will gladly continue asking. Good evening. Thanks very much for your talk. I found it extremely interesting. I personally feel I'm very fond of dolphins. I'm very interested in them because I understand they're very, very intelligent. I don't know whether I'm mistaken or not, because I'm no scientist at all. But my question to you is, there are some zoos that have shows with dolphins in swimming pools, etc. This type of relationship, this type of show with humans and dolphins, this relationship between them in these shows, is it good? Is it not good? Do dolphins in those circumstances suffer? Do they enjoy those shows? And from the point of view of the relationship between humans and dolphins, is this way of presenting dolphins good and interesting? I'd like to know your point of view about that.
Picking up on the translation. You are totally correct. Dolphins are extremely intelligent. It's very hard to measure intelligence because dolphins have really big brains. That's good. And the brains are very convoluted and wrinkly, and they have lots of brain regions that we know make complex cognition. But also crows and parrots have really small brains, and they are also highly intelligent. Dolphins, a lot of what we understand about dolphin intelligence comes from studying them in captivity. So there's a woman called Diana Rees in the 70s and 80s began studying them, and she one thing that's very hard to understand with another animal is does it have self-consciousness? Does it understand that it is an individual different from other individuals? And one test you can do is you can put a mirror in front of an animal and see how it reacts, and then you can take a pen and you can put a mark on a part of the animal's body that it cannot see with its eyes, and see if it sees it in the mirror and realizes that the mark is on its body. And they did this with dolphins with like a felt tip pen, and they put a mark on them, and the dolphins, they saw the mark, so they passed the test of consciousness. But then with the mirror, the dolphins also opened their mouths and waggled their tongues, and they looked at all the other parts of their bodies that they couldn't normally see, and they played games, and they had sex, and they basically did all the kinds of things that humans would probably do if you suddenly gave them a mirror for the first time. I use this example because many protections have been made for dolphins in captivity, and in general, there is a movement to remove dolphins from captive situations, which I agree with. But we only know about many of their capacities from experiments, from people studying them in captivity. So I think that for many dolphins, it has been good that there have been a few dolphins in captivity, but I think the lives of those dolphins has been, in general, very sad. The life at Loro Park in Tenerife, the life expectancy of the killer whales there is tiny compared to the life expectancy in the wild. Their fins get floppy, they act like they're crazy, they just swim in circles and circles and circles. And often in these discussions we talk about those things like their physical bodies, but this is an animal that swims over areas the size of Madrid every day. So, and they do it in company with friends and relations, talking all the time. And I think that's the bit of the torture that we don't think about, is that we remove them from their culture. Like the worst torture for a human is solitary confinement. Generally, that is the thing that makes people go crazy, not pain. Not terrible food, not stress positions. But these animals are in a very boring concrete box that's totally different from the ocean. It tastes horrible. They're given dead fish to eat with nobody. In those conditions, sometimes they can form incredible relationships with the people that go there to look after them. And many of those people have really good hearts, and they care about those animals, and they want to make their lives really good, and they make real relationships. So it's complicated. But I think those are the relationships you can make in a prison. And that's different from the relationships you can make outside of a prison. Yeah.
¿Alguien más?
Any other questions over there? Good evening. Thanks so much, Tom, for this beautiful, fascinating explanation you've given. I have two questions. One, how do they make these sounds? Is it a way of making sound like ours, with vocal cords expelling the air? Is it similar to what we do? Is it different? And number two, in comparison with other mammals, also very intelligent mammals, living in communities, would you say that the language of whales and dolphins is richer, less rich, similar to the languages used by other groups of mammal animals?
Great questions. So when we say whale and when we say dolphin, it's really confusing because whales are dolphins and dolphins are whales. So all of whales and dolphins and porpoises in English are called whales. And there are two kinds of whales. There's the ones with teeth, odontocetes, and there are the ones with baleen plates, like a toothbrush, like plates, like, in fact, and the ones with teeth, they all are predators, and they all hunt. But the ones with teeth tend to hunt one animal at a time, and the ones with the baleen plates take big gulps of the sea, and they eat lots and lots of animals all at once. And those two different kinds of whales, they make sounds in totally different ways. The ones with the baleen plates, they're the big ones generally because they eat lots of fish at once. And the ones with the teeth, all of those are the dolphins and porpoises and pilot whales and those kinds of smaller animals because they can't eat as much. So, but they split a long time ago, the two groups. So the ones that have teeth, they have like a melon on the front of their head, this lump. You know, if you think of Flipper or they have this lump there, that is their nose. So 55 million years ago, their ancestor, Pakicetus, was this long, was a kind of wolfy pig that went down towards the sea, and it had a long snout. And gradually, as it went into the water, its nose, like a hippo, or like an alligator, came on the top of its head. Now, what it did is imagine if you took your nose and then you folded it around on itself like that. So you have these two nostrils going from up there through this big lumpy melon. And inside the melon is like a amplifier of a sack of fats and oils and muscles and connective tissues. It's really complicated, and it's for manipulating sound. So you have your nostrils there at the top, and then you have the skull there, and then you have all of this other stuff in the middle, the melon. And what it does is if you watch a whale underwater and it makes a sound, no bubbles come out. In toothed whales, they move air around inside their head from little air sacs, like that. And they go between little pairs of kind of lips that go as the air is moving through, and those clicks go through the melon, it amplifies them, bounce off out the skull and go out. And the toothed whales, they use that for echolocating. They make the sounds and they listen to it coming back like bats. But they also make little squeaks and farts and other sounds too. The baleen whales don't use their nose, they use their throat in a process very similar to us. But unlike us, again, air does not come out. They circulate the air up and down. Now, this is a big challenge because if you're circulating air within your body and then you dive a kilometer underwater to hunt on the seabed or deeper, the air takes up much less space. So you have no air to move backwards and forwards. And I spent yesterday with a scientist called Lee Hickmott, and he puts tags on the back of pilot whales. And he's noticed that they're able to make many more kinds of communications on the surface than when they're deep. At the surface, they make these squeaks and squeals, and when they're diving, just clicks. And that's because there's no air to make the other more complicated sounds. So one way to think about this is hold your nose and cover your mouth. Everybody. Take a deep breath first. And now try and communicate with each other. Use all of your air areas. Use your nose, use your mouth, use your throat. You'll notice that you have different places you can move air around. That our ancestors share that. They're using the same anatomy, but they've developed theirs. In answer to your second question, there's 90 different species of whales and dolphins and porpoise. Some of them make very few sounds. They don't seem to be very social. Like blue whales make this big deep sound. It can travel theoretically hundreds of miles. They can't hear because of all of our boats. And they only make one or two different sounds that we can tell. Whereas some groups like bottlenose dolphins have names for themselves, like signature whistles and dialects, and they make hundreds and hundreds of different sounds. But we're only just beginning to listen, so we don't know. Is that just because we've studied bottlenose dolphins more than any other dolphin? Killer whales can sing duets with themselves. They can make two sounds at the same time. But are they doing anything meaningful with that? Or is it kind of like wolf howls? So we don't know, basically. Oh, in comparison with other mammals,
like primates?
So with primates aren't vocal as much. So the reason that what's interesting about comparing us to whales is that we are much more vocal than other primates. Chimpanzees cannot control their vocal tract. It's a big enigma why we have the same anatomy in our throat, but we can control it and they cannot. If a chimpanzee has to aspirate, has to hush, across its throat. We can really finely control the flow of air so that it comes out without, if you held a piece of paper, it wouldn't even blow. When did we get that ability? Whales and dolphins, body language, they have many other forms of communication. They, for instance, sperm whales spend half their time touching each other, holding hands. Their communication of touch, they can touch each other using their voices. The sperm whales, they're so powerful that they can touch each other over a distance with their clicks. But sound is not as useful at long distances in the forest to keep a chimpanzee group together. Like other forms of communication, bashing trees and being close to each other are different forms, and little grunts and pants and making the hairs on your back stand up, and gestures. Gestures are incredibly important for chimpanzees. But whales and dolphins seem closer to us. In the sea, you cannot see a gesture if there is plankton in the water or you're underneath so deep there's no light. Sound travels 4.5 times faster. It's really good to be able to communicate using sound. So we are the best probably mammalian analog for cetaceans, because among primates, we are weird. We're strange.
¿Alguien más? La última.
That was a very involved answer, sorry.
One last question.
Quería preguntarte cuáles.
I'd like to ask you if you have any reasons why cetaceans become disoriented, confused, and they end up on our beaches. Before you if if you can give a short answer, then we will have time for a last person who has raised his hands at the back, so we don't leave anyone out.
I'm not very good at short answers because I think of something else. I will try. It's a good question because cetaceans have been arriving on our beaches since long before the seas were used industrially. So some of the reasons they become disorientated we know. So in England, in half of the strandings where the cetacean comes ashore, there is a link with human activity. Either they get inside our fishing nets and their echolocation is confused, or we test sonar or drilling or navy technologies and the sound is so loud that they run away in terror. But many of the times that they come onto the beach is not related to us. Often if you are an old dying whale, you will just float, you will just be on the surface and you'll just be washed onto the shore. But there are some places, for instance, we have mass strandings when you have 10, 20 or 50 or 100 whales coming together when they're not sick. And this is very strange. And we saw this in Scotland this year and 2 years before. And in New Zealand, there is a particular beach which is very famous. And on the south coast of England, I have seen strandings there. It's thought that the seabed in some places is a trap. The angle of slow, sandy bays with particular currents, it disorientates deep diving whales because it's often very similar deep water whales that get this problem. So that when they come close to the shore, it's like a trap for them, the landscape. But their bonds with each other, almost finished, their bonds with each other are also a trap because the species of whales that die in big groups are the ones that are most close to each other. They live in the middle of the ocean. I was just filming them in Tenerife, and they dive and they hunt giant squid and they look after each other's children and they talk to each other all the time. And the only way they survive is together. There's the mothers and their daughters and their granddaughters. And so they are so tightly bonded together that if one of them is in trouble, the other ones, it seems like, cannot leave them. So for instance, in Scotland, there was a female and she was giving birth and there was a problem and the others could not leave her, and she washed on the beach and the others got washed on the beach and they were healthy. And human volunteers, I interviewed them, they put them back in the water and the whales swam back to the beach again. What other animal does that? If your baby is in a room that's on fire, do you go back into the room that's on fire? Yeah. Like, not all other species, like if your friend is in danger, if your family, like they know it's dangerous, but their bonds are too strong. So that is, I think, like it's the problem with connection. If you survive by being connected to each other, and it's evidence of this culture and this communication is when it has a downside, like the Achilles heel of it. Yeah.
No, yeah.
The noise from boats is like a huge problem, at least 50% of the problem.
A ver, quedaba una solamente y rápida. Sí, gracias.
Time for one last question. Can you hear? Yes. I wanted to ask how much time is it necessary to learn the language of the cetaceans, and what would the words be like, and can they have grammar or a grammatic structure in their language?
So we don't know how long it's going to take to understand, because imagine that these tools are like a telescope and we are looking for life on another planet. Until now, we can look at whales and we can see them communicating, and some people can say they're doing nothing, and other people can say it's language. Now we have a telescope and we can look really closely, in the same way that I could look at the moon and say it's made of cheese, and you could look at the moon and say no, it's made of rock. We get a telescope, but maybe the telescope is not powerful enough to tell the difference between cheese and rock. Maybe we have more details, because the moon is different from the Earth, and these languages or these communication systems are different from ours. We have never tried to map a non-human communication system before. Saying that, already I think Project SETI was thinking in the next 2 or 3 years they would have enough recordings to see if the large language model tools like Google Translate can find language-like patterns and if there's any overlap. They've already found a few signals, like the signal for dive, by linking the behavior to the vocalizations, and they've done some analysis of the overall statistics of how many different kinds of vocalization and how they're controlled. But we don't know how long it's going to take. We could imagine we were looking at another planet and we found that it had a form of life that was not like ours, but it was a form of life. How long until we understand how it works? You don't know. You just know that you found a different version of something. I like the idea that we will never understand what they're saying. I think that's more interesting, to know that, because how would a whale say wet? You know, how their lives have some similarities, but there are other things that are totally different. If you can see in density, how do you describe the world to each other? Perhaps, you know, there are things that are untranslatable. What was your second part of your question? Sorry.
Si tendría una estructura gramática.
I think it was about whether there would be a grammatical structure in the language.
There is already evidence in other species of syntactical structures. So where, for instance, in the word cat is made of k, at, or at, like two phonemes, cat, and ka means nothing, and t means nothing, but when you combine them together, cat, it means something. So when you're looking in other animal communication systems, one of the things you look for is how many basic units of sound do they make, and how many combinations do they put them into, and do those different combinations mean different things to the animals? And in some birds and in dolphins, and like they have already found that that they do have syntax, that they can create phonemes into sort of like words. Dolphins have also been in captivity. They did experiments where they taught the dolphins a kind of sign language, and then they changed the order of the symbol, like take the ball and put it in the ring. So you have the object, the action, and the order of the action. And then the dolphin would show that it could understand by doing exactly that task. And then you could change the order of those signals. And the same with parrots. There's a parrot called Alex, the African grey parrot, and he proved that he could tell the difference between abstract systems. He was given 3 different kinds of two objects, and they would be different either in color or texture or shape. So how does a parrot understand the concept of color or texture or shape? Alex, you'd show him the object and he would say color, texture, shape. and he would get it right like 90% of the time. He also would say, "Tired now, going home," because he was bored of the boring, easy experiment. So there are many, like we can look for evidence of human syntax and grammar rules in other animals, but we can also show that animals can understand grammar rules in languages that we make up for experiments. But we do not know if they have some of the most complicated parts of our language. Like recursion is where you take like a mini sentence and you place it within another sentence and you kind of make nests of ideas and thoughts. That's one thing. Or we don't know if they can ask questions. We haven't got evidence of that. We don't know if they can discuss something that has not happened. If they can refer to something in their imagination. But we have only been listening for like a few years. So, and also maybe they're used to before we killed most of them, and maybe they're learning how to do it again. Imagine if you killed 99% of the humans, what language would be left? You know, we have never listened to them communicating with the full complexity. For instance, during the COVID pandemic, when all the boats stopped moving and the oceanic noise went down, they've done some experiments already, and like one of them was on stress, and you can tell the stress of a whale by looking at its hair and how much cortisol was in it, and the whales became really relaxed, and they also can go back in time. And when we were hunting whales, they were more relaxed than now when there's so much noise all the time. It's like a chronic background stress to their lives. And when we stopped driving our ships around, and the ocean noise went down, they started doing more complicated communications to each other, which makes sense. Because if you're in a loud room, like a nightclub, you go like, "Mate, I'm going to the toilet. Are you coming?" You have to shout really simple things when there's a lot of noise. But if you want to have a complicated, nuanced, sensitive, reflective conversation, you choose somewhere quiet. So maybe we're not able to give them the opportunity to exhibit their full range. And also, we study them in captivity. If you took my daughter, who's 2, and Wales took her to a scientific study, and then they tried to see what her language skills are before she's learnt them from us, what would the whale scientist think humans are capable of? Not very much. We learn it from each other in our cultures and our contexts.
Pues
that was a short answer.
Me he quedado con ganas.
I still would like to ask what you would ask that whale back in 2015. But since you cannot answer that question with one phrase, I don't dare ask. But if you can answer in one sentence, what would you say to that whale if you could speak to it? One phrase.
Show me the thing that's most important to you. That's it.
Muchísimas.
Thanks so much, Tom. Thanks very much for telling us your story and telling us about all the science that is behind that gaze. Thanks for opening our eyes through your book, opening our eyes to the culture of other animals and allowing us to enlarge our capacity to listen to other forms of communicating with them. And I think we will now hear a playback of whale sounds. Am I right? Okay.
El playback y después
So we have this playback, and then we have the signing of your books.
As part of, I'm an ambassador for this charity, Whale and Dolphin Conservation. So I go to like COP28 climate meetings and United Nations and schools and anyone who wants to listen to whales, where people are deciding things about the lives of whales, we play them sounds. So there is a long tradition in our culture of playing whale sounds to each other together. My hero, Rachel Carson, she was a biologist, a marine biologist in the United States. She was the first person ever to play whale sounds to people in 1951. So, you know, we've been doing this for a long time. Roger Payne and Katie, they did it too in the 70s. But so I have, in writing the book, I was sent thousands of recordings, and I have made my own. And we have made a piece called How to Be a Whale, which is like, instead of me telling you about whales, it's much better to listen to them yourself. If you go to this exhibition 2 floors up, all of the sounds there are real field recordings put together, and you were the first in the world to listen. We've made this thing for the BBC called How to Be a Whale. And when I was in the Canary Islands with this guy Misael, who studies the whales there, he gave me he translated it into Spanish. So this is the first performance of, I'll just show you a small bit of we haven't released it yet, of the Spanish version of How to Be a Whale. Could you turn all the lights off, all of them? And can you close your eyes, and then, let me see, okay, are you ready? And I'll just play you 4 minutes of this. And it's 35 minutes long, so I can send it to you if you want your own thing, but this is just a bit.
Eres un cachalote y estás naciendo. Tus tías, hermanas y abuela se reúnen alrededor. Cuerpos presionados juntos. Te han sentido dentro de tu madre. Un chorro de sangre. Primero la cola y luego sales. Te estiras y estiras, arrugado por estar acurrucado dentro. Tu tía te levanta del agua con su nariz para que tomes tu primer respiro. Tu vida será una danza entre la superficie y las profundidades. El primer cuarto de tu cuerpo es una máquina de sonido gigante, exquisitamente controlada. Te llevará meses de balbuceo y charla de bebé hasta aprender a usarla. acentos y dialectos. Las señales que usas para coordinar tus cacerías, para defenderse unos a otros, para arrancar peces de las largas líneas de pescas con el más suave tirón de tus enormes dientes. Como dormir con un ojo abierto y la mitad de tu cerebro alerta. Para cazar calamares colosales, monstruos de las profundidades conventosas, en agua más fría que el hielo, tan profunda que tus costillas se han doblado sobre sí mismas con la presión, con una bocanada de aire que tomaste hace 1 hora, a 2 kilómetros de distancia. Ocultos en tu habla de clics están todos esos secretos.
So yeah, that's just a little bit of it.
Ya estará solo ese poquito.
Ha sido como una...
It's been like a whale mindfulness session, whaleness, yes. Thanks very much. And I think we now have this lot for the signing of books. So, well, if you ask Tom, he will kindly sign your copy. Thanks very much. I feel very privileged at having met you.
I have whale stamps, so I'll stamp your book too if you want. Thank you very much.